Max stared at the hand, unable to move, as if the air around him had thickened into concrete. His flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced across the dirt floor and the cold stone walls. The silence in the basement wasn't just silence, it was a kind of pressure, like the space itself held its breath. He stumbled backward, hitting his shoulder against the low stone wall. A dry sob escaped him. The hand was small, child-sized, bones wrapped in remnants of cloth that had long since lost its color. Torn lace, maybe. The edges were frayed, moldy, like it had been down there for decades. And that pink bike, it had cartoon stickers on the frame, now faded and curling at the edges. One of them looked like a unicorn. Max felt sick. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. The operator answered calmly, but he could barely get the words out. I think I found a body, a child's body, in my basement. The silence on the other end was brief but telling. Then came the calm, professional tone. Sir, please stay on the line. Help is on the way. He sat outside the house for the next 2 hours, unable to go back inside. Jordan arrived just as the police did. She'd gotten his text, but by the time she saw it, his follow-up message had already come in. Just 4 words. Call the police now. She looked pale as she approached him, her mouth barely moving. Max, is it real? He didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could do was nod. Detectives swarmed the place. Crime scene tape went up. Forensics came next. They dug carefully, unearthing what Max had seen, confirming it wasn't just one bone, but an entire small skeleton curled, in the fetal position beneath the soil. A second bag was found, tucked behind a support beam filled with children's clothing, a cracked digital camera, and a torn shoe. The lead detective, a grey-haired woman named Nancy Greer, crouched down beside Max outside the house. Her voice was low, gentle but firm. You said you moved in 3 weeks ago? He nodded. And you had no idea there was a trapdoor? None. It was sealed under the floor. She exhaled slowly. We think this may be the Hart girl. Emily Hart went missing in 2009. You heard of her? Not until today, Max whispered. I just wanted to fix up a house. Greer nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed locked on his face, measuring his truth. That night, the discovery hit the news. Missing girl Emily Hart may have been found in long-abandoned house. Old footage from 15 years ago resurfaced. News clips, interviews with tear-streaked parents, a grainy photo of Emily in her blue dress, arms around her purple backpack, smiling like nothing in the world could ever touch her. The town of Penfield didn't sleep that night. Neither did Max or Jordan. The next morning, the police returned with cadaver dogs. Something had bothered Detective Greer. Maybe the way the skeleton was positioned, or the second bag that didn't seem to belong. The dogs picked up another scent near the wall, strong enough that forensics returned to scan the basement thoroughly. By evening, they found the second set of remains, smaller, younger. This one didn't have a name. No one had ever reported another child missing at the time. It was a toddler, maybe 2 or 3. And unlike Emily, whose body seemed buried with some care, this one had been tossed behind an old shelf like garbage. For Penfield, the nightmare had just begun. The news spread quickly. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a missing girl being found. It was about who else was buried there, and what else had happened in that house. Detective Greer called in reinforcements. The case was officially reopened. Locals gathered outside the old Whitmore place, some in curiosity, some in protest. A few even showed up with signs. The house is evil, one read. She wasn't the first, read another. One woman in her 60s tried to push past the police tape. They never listened back then, she shouted. I told them. That place is cursed. He used to live there. He took her. Greer stopped her personally. Who used to live? Here, Mum? The woman's name was Agnes Carter, lived 3 blocks away. Claimed that back in the late 90s, a man named Walter Cribben lived in the house. Alone, reclusive, odd. Rumors had swirled for years. People said he watched kids from his window, said he had been questioned once when a neighbor's daughter had gone missing for an hour and was later found crying in a drainage ditch. but no charges were ever filed. "He just disappeared one day," Agnes said, "like a ghost. House sat empty after that." Max and Jordan were relocated to a motel by the city while the investigation continued. The dream of flipping the house was dead, but that was the least of their worries. Every night, Max couldn't stop seeing that hand reaching out of the dirt. And Jordan. She started dreaming of the house before it was a ruin, before the paint peeled and the windows shattered. She dreamed of screams muffled behind walls, of a girl on a bike, pedaling down a sunlit street into the mouth of darkness. And when she told Max about her dream, he turned to her, pale and trembling. "I had the same one," he whispered. The motel smelled of bleach and overcooked eggs. Max had barely slept. Jordan tossed in the bed beside him, her dreams a mess of shadows and whispers. Every creak in the motel walls made them flinch. Neither said it aloud, but both of them were afraid the house had followed them. By noon the next day, Detective Say, Greer called. Her voice was tired. "We've confirmed through dental records. The remains belong to Emily Hart." Max swallowed the lump in his throat. "And the second child?" "Still unidentified. Younger. No local reports of missing. Kids that match the profile." "So how did—" "We're working on it." There was a silence. "I need to ask you and your wife to come down to the station. We found something else in the basement." Max's stomach dropped. "What now?" "It's better if I show you in person." At the Penfield Police Department, Greer met them in the evidence room. She had a clear plastic bin waiting. Inside, sealed in bags, were items recovered from the site. She laid them out one at a time like some twisted show and tell. First, the drawing book, moldy but mostly intact. A few pages were still legible. Jordan flipped through them, hands shaking. There were childish sketches of trees, houses, stick figures. One drawing showed a smiling girl with yellow hair on a bike. But the drawings got darker the further in they went. Scribbles of a crying face, a large shadow in a window, a girl behind bars. One page had the words, "He watches," scrawled over and over again in a child's handwriting. The last legible page had a sketch of the Whitmore house, seen from the outside. The window was circled in red. Inside, the shape of a man, just an outline, no face, towered in the frame. Beside him, a girl sat on the floor, head down. Jordan looked up, eyes filled with tears. "She was drawing where she was kept," Greer nodded. "We think she may have been held in that basement. For how long, we don't know yet. But she was alive down there, at least for a while." Max leaned on the wall, feeling like the room was closing in. "What kind of monster does that to a kid?" Greer hesitated. "We think we know who lived there at the time. Walter Cribben lived alone, no family, no work history, just off the grid." "What happened to him?" "Disappeared in 2010. Neighbors said he was acting strange for weeks before. Sold his truck, stopped picking up mail, then one day, gone. No trace, no activity on any accounts, nothing." "You think he's dead?" Greer looked grim. "I think he's hiding. Or someone helped him hide." Later that night, back in the motel, Jordan stared at the ceiling. Why didn't the police ever search that house back then? "They said they did," Max murmured, "but it must have been half-assed. Maybe he covered the trapdoor. Maybe they just missed it." "I don't buy it." "What do you mean?" She turned to face him. "What if they didn't miss it? What if they just didn't care enough to really look?" Max sat up. The idea chilled him. But in a small town like Penfield, who knew what corners were cut? The next day brought more news. Another body had been found. Not in the house, but in the woods behind it. Shallow grave, bones scattered, animal interference. A boy this time. Also young, between 6 and 9 years old. There were no known missing reports in Penfield that matched. But what chilled Detective Greer even more was the age of the grave. The forensic pathologist estimated the boy had died 20 years ago, long before Emily. The case exploded in the media. Suddenly, Penfield wasn't just the town where a girl disappeared. It was a possible hunting ground for a serial child. Predator. Journalists swarmed the streets. Old neighbors were interviewed. Every weird story about the Whitmore house came back to life. Tales of children hearing voices, seeing faces in the windows, pets disappearing. Some folks swore it had always been cursed. Others were convinced someone had been helping Cribben. Greer chased every lead. A former postal worker claimed Cribben used to get strange packages, heavy ones, no return address. A retired detective, one of the original officers on Emily's, Seghase refused to comment. But records showed the house was never thoroughly searched. The report had simply marked it vacant, entry not necessary. The town began to turn on itself. Online forums speculated wildly. Was Cribben acting alone? Was it a ring? Why hadn't the police caught him? Who helped him disappear? That night, Jordan sat by the motel window, arms wrapped around herself. "You ever think," she whispered, "we weren't supposed to find her?" Max stared at her. "What?" "The house was buried in secrets for 15 years, and we just walked into it." "You think we were chosen?" She didn't answer, just stared into the dark. Across town, in a dusty file storage room beneath the Penfield courthouse, a junior clerk named Danielle was going through old records, scanning them for digital backups. She stumbled upon a cardboard box marked, "Whitmore sealed, do not shred." Inside were files that had never been entered into the main system. Photos, notes, unprocessed evidence bags, a copy of a restraining order filed in 1998 by a woman named Evelyn Cribben against her own brother, Walter. The reason? Unsafe around children. Talks to them through walls. I fear he'll hurt someone. And at the bottom, a handwritten note, unsigned but dated just weeks before Emily vanished. "Check the house. Something's buried there." Danielle sat frozen in front of the open box, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the aged paperwork. The restraining order, the anonymous note, even a faded Polaroid photo of the house in 1998. It was all there, untouched for over a decade. She scanned the handwriting carefully, the way the note trailed off near the end, as if someone had been interrupted mid-thought. She knew she shouldn't remove evidence from the courthouse, but she also knew her supervisor had a habit of accidentally misplacing inconvenient files, so she took photos of everything on her phone and slipped the documents back exactly where she found them. She didn't sleep that night, she couldn't. Meanwhile, back at the motel, Max and Jordan were visited again by Detective Greer. This time, she brought someone with her, a man in a dark suit who didn't offer a name, just credentials. FBI. "Given the discovery of multiple bodies spanning decades," Greer said carefully, "the case is now considered federal. We'll be expanding the search radius." The agent spoke up then, his voice clipped and official. "We're also looking into missing children from other states. Cribben may have traveled. This could be much bigger than Penfield." Max leaned forward. "Has anyone found him?" "Not yet," the agent said flatly. "But if he's alive, we will." Jordan wasn't so sure. What if he's dead? What if someone else took over after him? That idea hung in the air for a beat too long. Max and Jordan were given the option to sell the house back to the city or keep it under surveillance. They didn't hesitate. "Take it," Max said. "We don't want anything to do with that place ever again." Greer nodded. "Good. You shouldn't." But the house wasn't finished speaking. That same night, a local teenager named Kyle, Warren, 15 years old, bored and looking for TikTok clout, snuck past the police tape with 2 of his friends. They brought a phone, flashlights, and way too much confidence. The video was shaky and dark, filled with dumb jokes and nervous laughter. But halfway through, things changed. The laughter stopped. The screen cut to Kyle, standing in the basement, staring at the far wall. One of the other boys muttered, "Dude, what is that?" The camera panned. There was something written on the wall now. Fresh. In red. "I never left." The video ended in chaos. Screams, the phone falling, a scramble of footsteps. When the police found them hours later, the boys were crying and incoherent. One had wet himself. The other refused to speak at all. Kyle had deep scratches down his back. thin, precise, like fingernails. The wall was clean the next day. No fingerprints, no evidence of paint, but the scratches on Kyle, those were real. Greer called Max again. "You didn't do anything in the house, did you?" "Nothing odd." "What do you mean?" "I mean anything like burning sage, lighting candles, asking questions out loud, anything like that?" Max frowned. "No, we demoed the floor, knocked down some drywall." "Why?" "Because sometimes," Greer said slowly, "when you disturb something buried for that long, it doesn't like being woken up." It was meant as a throwaway line, a tired cop trying to explain the unexplainable, but it stuck with Max. That night, Jordan got up around 3 a.m. She stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom staring at her own reflection, not at her eyes, at something just over her shoulder, something she thought she saw but couldn't be sure. She blinked. Gone. But when she turned away, the mirror fogged from the shower's leftover steam, and one word slowly formed in the condensation. "Why?" she screamed. Max came running, but by the time he got there, the mirror was clean. They left the motel the next morning, unable to stand another minute there. Greer arranged for them to stay at a cabin farther out of town, near a lake, quiet, peaceful. But the peace didn't last. On their second night there, Max had a dream. He was walking through the Whitmore house, but it wasn't rotted or abandoned. It was perfect, like a model home, brightly lit, fresh paint, clean floors, but no furniture, no people, just rooms stretching endlessly. He kept walking deeper and deeper until he reached a room with a child's bed. A figure sat on it. Small, pale. Emily. She turned to him and whispered, "He's still here." Max jerked awake, gasping. Sweat soaked his shirt. Jordan lay beside him, shaking. "I had the dream too," she whispered. "Exactly the same." At that moment, Max's phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "You shouldn't have opened the door." The screen went black. He stared at it for a long time, his heart hammering in his chest. "Max," Jordan whispered, "I think the house isn't done with us." He nodded slowly, and somewhere, not far from the cabin, deep in the woods, someone was watching. The next morning, Max drove to the police station, demanding to speak with Detective Greer. He showed her the text message. Her jaw clenched as she read it. "Number?" "Blocked," Max said. "No trace." She stood up, grabbing her coat. "Come with me." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the driveway of an old house on the far side of Penfield. It was overgrown, sagging under its own weight, but still standing. The mailbox said Cribben, though the letters were barely legible. "This is where Evelyn Cribben lived," Greer said. "Walter's sister, the one who filed that restraining order back in '98. I thought she moved away?" "She did, but I want to show you something." Inside, the place was covered in dust and silence. Greer guided Max to the basement. It looked similar to the Whitmore house, cold stone walls and the faint stink of something old. She flicked on a flashlight. There were bookshelves along the far wall, but not with novels or photo albums. These shelves held stacks of notebooks, journals, hundreds of them in various sizes and states of decay. "She kept records," Greer said quietly. She wrote down everything she remembered about her brother. Every time he vanished, every time she heard strange things at night. She was convinced Walter was involved in something dark, long before Emily ever went missing. Max ran his fingers across one of the journals, opening it carefully. The page was filled with frantic handwriting. "He talks to them at night. I hear him whisper through the vents. He says they don't understand what he's trying to show them." Another entry. "He dug something under the house. I asked what it was. He said, 'It's for later. I don't sleep anymore.'" Greer exhaled slowly. "Evelyn tried to tell people. No one listened. She died in 2016, alone. Stroke. The journals were left untouched until now." Max looked at her. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think you stirred something up. Not just bones in the basement. You woke something. That was supposed to stay hidden." Max frowned. "What do you mean, something?" I mean, there's more to this than just one man. She handed him a worn Polaroid. It showed a group of children standing in a circle. All looked scared. Behind them stood a tall man with his hand on a child's shoulder, his face blurred. Like the photo had been scratched on purpose. Written on the back in Evelyn's shaky handwriting, they called it the Circle. Walter said it kept them safe. Max's blood ran cold. That night back at the cabin, Jordan stood at the edge of the lake staring at her reflection. It didn't move when she did. She whispered, "Emily?" And her reflection smiled, while she did not. She screamed and stumbled back. Max came, running, finding her in the dirt, shaking. She couldn't even speak, just pointed at the water. Nothing was there. But deep beneath the surface, something dark moved. The following morning, the couple received a visit from Danielle, the courthouse clerk. She looked frantic, her eyes bloodshot. "I need to show you something," she said, sliding into the booth of the diner where Max and Jordan sat. She pulled up her phone and opened the photos she'd taken of the files, the restraining order, the anonymous tip, the note that said, "Check the house." "There's more," she said. "That note, it wasn't anonymous." "What do you mean?" Jordan asked. "I found another version. A draft, I guess." It was signed. She tapped her phone. There it was. "Check the house. Something's buried there." "I saw him with her. Deputy R. Howard." Max blinked. "A deputy?" "Yeah, he worked the case in '09, retired 2 years later." "Where is he now?" Danielle hesitated. "That's the thing. He lives right next to the Whitmore house." Max felt a chill crawl up his spine. Jordan leaned forward. "You think he knew? You think he helped?" Danielle didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Later that day, the three of them drove back to Sycamore Lane, staying. Outside, the police tape. The Whitmore house looked worse than ever, rotted, broken, hollow. Next door, the Howard residence sat quiet. An old truck was parked in the driveway, rust coating the bumper. Max and Danielle stayed back as Jordan approached the porch. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. Then the door creaked open, on its own. She stepped back instinctively. "Hello?" Nothing. She looked back at Max. He nodded barely. She stepped inside. The house was dim but not empty. There were signs of life, plates on the table, coffee still warm, photos on the wall, a badge in a glass case. Deputy Robert Howard, 1985-2011. Then she heard it. A voice, soft, coming from upstairs, a child's voice. "Help me." She froze. The voice came again, this time behind her. "Help. Me." She turned, but no one was there. She ran out, heart pounding, back to Max and Danielle. "He's in there," she gasped, "but he's not alone." They called Detective Greer immediately. When the police entered the house, they found it empty. No Howard, no sign of struggle. But the basement was open, and carved into the wall, freshly scratched into the concrete, she was never the only one. Detective Greer stood in the basement of Deputy Howard's home, flashlight beam dancing across the concrete. The scratching was deep and recent. She ran her fingers over the message. She was never the only one. "This isn't just a confession," she muttered. "It's a warning." The rest of the house had been left in a hurry. Doors open, drawers yanked out, clothes still hanging in the closet. But Robert Howard was gone, vanished, like Walter Cribben before him. The deputy's home was immediately sealed as a second crime scene. But the deeper they searched, the more disturbing things became. In the attic, they found locked trunks, each filled with artifacts, children's shoes, hair clips, broken toys, and worn-out dolls with names written on their feet. Some of the names matched known missing children from other towns, some didn't. One box was full of photographs, old ones, black and white mostly. Different children, same format, each child standing in front of a boarded-up house. Sometimes with Cribben behind them, sometimes with Howard, but sometimes and with someone else, a third man. His face was always turned, hidden, blurred by motion or bad focus, but he was always there. Greer called in analysts to restore the photos, but one thing became clear immediately. These pictures spanned decades. Some were from the 60s, others as recent as the early 2000s. The house in the background changed over the years, but the third man never aged. "We're not just looking at a predator," Greer said grimly. "We're looking at a pattern, a system, maybe even a cult." That word, cult, hit Max like a gut punch. Jordan couldn't stop pacing. "Why us? Why did it start again with us? We weren't supposed to even find that basement." Danielle sat stiffly, eyes wide. "Maybe. You didn't find it. Maybe it let you in." Greer looked between them. "There's something else. In Evelyn Cribben's journals, there's mention of a group, a ritual. She called it the Circle. Said it had rules, that it only took children under a certain age, that once someone saw the truth, they either joined or vanished." Max rubbed his temples. What the hell kind of town is this? Greer didn't answer, but her face said it all. That night Max couldn't sleep. He went down to the lake to clear his head. The water was calm, moonlight shimmering across the surface. He stared at his reflection, trying to breathe. Then it moved. Not him. His reflection. The figure in the water tilted its head slowly, smiled, then whispered, "You're part of it now." Max stumbled back, heart hammering, gasping as cold sweat drenched his back. He ran to the cabin, locking the door behind him. Jordan was already awake. She'd been watching something on her phone. "Max, you need to see this." It was a video. Kyle Warren, the teenager who'd snuck into the Whitmore house, had gone live on social media just an hour ago. He was in the woods, alone. "Everyone said I was lying," he muttered to the camera, breath shaky. "But I saw her. I saw the girl. She's out here, and I'm going to find her." The video shook as he walked deeper into the trees. At one point, he passed what looked like an old stone circle, half buried under moss and leaves. He didn't see the symbols carved into the rocks, but Jordan did. They matched the drawings in Emily's sketchbook. At the end of the video, the phone dropped suddenly. There was a sound like whispering voices layered over each other. Then silence. The feed ended. No one had heard from Kyle since. The police launched another search, but the woods gave up nothing. No body, no phone, just the stone circle. When Greer visited the site, she went alone. She stood in the center of the formation, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. The whispering started as soon as the sun dipped below the trees. Children's voices, crying, calling her name, pleading. She turned in every direction, heart racing. "Show yourself," she barked. Nothing. Then she turned back to her car and saw that every window had fogged up. Words were written in the condensation. "You knew. You ignored us. You let them take us." Greer stumbled back. For the first time in her career, she felt true fear. She realized the case was never cold, it was waiting. Back at the cabin, Jordan's dreams returned. Only this time she wasn't watching Emily. She was her, trapped in the basement, begging, screaming. And then a man walked down the stairs. Not Walter, not Howard. Someone worse, tall, ageless, hollow eyes, lips that never moved, but whispered straight into her skull. She woke up screaming. And in the silence that followed, Max finally said it out loud. "I think the circle's still active." Jordan stared at him, her eyes full of dread. "I think they never stopped. I think the house was just one of many." By the end of that week, Penfield was on edge. The mayor called in state investigators. The woods were cordoned off. Missing posters for Kyle Warren fluttered across power poles and storefront windows, right next to 15-year-old flyers of Emily Hart. Two different faces, same lost look. Max spent every night reading Evelyn Cribben's journals. The deeper he went, the more twisted it became. Her entries weren't just memories, they were warnings, pleas, desperate attempts to convince someone, anyone, that something ancient had taken root beneath Penfield. One journal mentioned an abandoned church west of town, near the edge of an old farm settlement, St. Lyle's it was called, burned down in 1963 after a suspected arson. But Evelyn wrote that before it burned, children whispered of secret services held in the basement. Not sermons, ceremonies. They wore white masks. They hummed instead of praying. They drew circles in the dust. Walter said they gave him power, that they showed him how to open doors no one else could see. The next day, Max convinced Jordan and Danielle to go with him. Greer sent an officer to accompany them, Officer Brett Long, a big guy with a slow drawl and eyes like he'd seen too much. They found what was left of the church deep in the woods, off a forgotten trail. Only stone. Pillars and crumbled walls remained. Vines and moss had overtaken everything. Trees grew where pews once stood, but the cellar door still existed, old iron buried under brush. It took 2 hours to break the lock. Inside, the basement was dark, damp, and still held the smell of soot and rot. The stairs creaked under their weight. Long drew his pistol immediately. The room opened up to a chamber of carved stone. Strange markings were scratched into every surface. Circles, eyes, open palms. Some had been drawn in what looked like chalk, others, something darker. In the center, a stone altar. Max approached it slowly. His flashlight caught something lodged in the crack beneath the altar's edge. A photograph. Emily Hart. Not a missing poster. Not a school photo, a Polaroid. Recent. Jordan gasped. How is that possible? Danielle turned to the wall. Guys. There were more photos there, hidden under vines and dust. Dozens. Old, new, black and white. Polaroids, prints. All children. All terrified. Some missing. Some never reported. Long radioed it in, his voice shaking. Detective Greer, you're going to want to see this. We just found a shrine. Back in Penfield, panic spread. Greer worked around the clock, her board, now filled with strings and faces and newspaper clippings. What started as a missing person case had become a multi-generational pattern of ritual abuse and disappearance. And at the center of it all, one name that kept coming up, Samuel Norrell, a man mentioned briefly in a 1961 article. Former priest, excommunicated, connected to St. Lyle's before the fire, rumored to have gone mad, talking about purifying the light in children and breaking the seals of the mortal womb. He disappeared after the fire, presumed dead, but Evelyn mentioned him in a 1997 entry. Walter met a man in the woods, called him Sam, said he taught him the old ways. Sam shouldn't still be alive. The circle wasn't just a group. It was a ritual line, a chain of teachings passed down from one monster to the next. Walter was just a link, Howard another. But Samuel, he might have been the beginning, and he might still be out there. Greer ordered teams to scour the region for any living descendants or records tied to Samuel Norrell, but everything was faded, purged, erased, like someone had been wiping his tracks for decades. Meanwhile, Jordan started seeing things. At first, just in dreams. Then in mirrors, then out the corner of her eye. Children, watching, not malicious, just lost, waiting. One girl appeared more than the rest. Blue dress, blonde hair, purple backpack. Emily. She started leaving drawings on Jordan's bedside table, drawings of the stone circle, the basement, and of a man with no eyes and too many teeth. One night, Jordan woke up to find the drawing pinned to her chest, right over her heart. The girl stood at the foot of the bed. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them where the others are." Jordan tried to reach out, but Emily vanished. The next day, Jordan took Max and Danielle back to the circle in the woods. They brought shovels. Hours passed with nothing but sweat and dirt. Then Danielle's shovel struck something hard, a wooden box. Inside, bones, 6 small skulls, each with a name etched onto the forehead. Only 2 matched known records. The others had never been reported. No birth certificates, no social security numbers, ghost children. And each skull had a symbol carved into the cranium, a circle within a circle. Jordan fell to her knees, sobbing. They were forgotten, completely, like they never existed. Max touched her shoulder. "No, not anymore. We found them. We'll make them matter." Danielle looked around, suddenly uneasy. "It's too quiet." The wind had stopped. The birds were gone. Even the air felt thick. And then came the whispering. From every direction. Children's voices. He's coming. He's almost here. You opened the door. Officer Long raised his weapon. Stay close. But none of them saw the figure standing behind the nearest tree, watching, smiling, ageless, and very much alive. The figure behind the tree didn't move. He didn't blink. His face was long and pale, skin thin as paper, stretched over bones that didn't seem quite right. He wore a black coat that hung like a curtain, and his mouth curved upward, impossibly wide. Max froze mid-breath. Jordan turned. Danielle screamed. Officer Long fired first, but the figure was already gone. Not running, not diving, just gone. As if he had never been there at all. The shot echoed through the trees, but the woods remained dead quiet. No wind, no birds, no movement. And then, a low hum. It started in the ground. A vibration, a thrum, like something waking beneath their feet. The circle. The stones began to tremble. Not much, but enough to feel it in their spines. "We need to go," Max said, voice tight. "Now." They sprinted back to the car, hearts hammering, shovels and evidence left behind. Officer Long kept his gun drawn the entire time. Jordan whispered the whole ride back, over and over. "That was him. That was Samuel. He's not human." Max didn't disagree. When they returned to Penfield, Greer was already waiting. Her face had lost color. She didn't ask what happened. She only handed them a folder. "Old birth records," she said, quietly. "Before the state started digital tracking, I had them pulled from county archives. Inside were a dozen names, all children listed as stillborn or dead within hours of birth, except several of those names matched the skulls they'd found." Jordan blinked, confused. "They were marked dead. At birth." Greer nodded. "Officially, they never lived, but I think they were taken." "By who?" "By the Circle." Danielle flipped through the pages. One birth certificate had been signed by a nurse named Alice Norrell. "Same last name as Samuel." Greer nodded again. "His sister. She worked in the hospital back in the 60s, disappeared in 1972. No records since. Probably changed her to Mustafa. So this thing. It goes back generations," Max said. Greer looked up. "Max, it doesn't just go back. It spreads. Every town has one of these places. Every county has a circle. We've been pulling records from 3 other towns, same symbols, same disappearances, and always tied to abandoned buildings, churches, or homes no one wants to buy." Jordan gripped Max's hand. "Then this isn't over." "No," Greer said, "not even close." That night, they stayed in the police station. Greer insisted. The cabin wasn't safe. The woods were off limits. The entire town was locking down. But the nightmares followed them anyway. Jordan saw the stone altar again. Emily was there, but this time she was pointing, behind the altar, at a hatch. "Find it," she said, "before he comes back." Then her face melted into bone, and Jordan screamed awake. She made Greer take them back to the ruined church. Even with guards posted and a floodlight set up, she demanded they move the altar. The hatch was real, wooden, rotted, hidden beneath layers of rock. They pried it open. A narrow shaft led down, deeper than expected. The air turned foul, metallic, like blood and mildew soaked into dirt. At the bottom, a tunnel, low and cramped, but real. Max led the way, flashlight flickering. Jordan followed. Then Greer. Danielle stayed at the surface with Long, too shaken to go further. The tunnel twisted downward. Roots broke through the ceiling. Symbols lined the walls, all hand-carved, all ancient. Finally, it opened into a room, a chamber. Candles lined the walls, melted into the dirt. At the far end, a slab, not stone but bone. Skulls fused together, forming a grotesque table, and chained above it, Deputy Robert Howard, barely alive, eyes wide, mouth sewn shut. He shook violently when they entered, trying to scream. Jordan rushed forward, grabbing his face. "Who did this to you?" she cried. His eyes darted behind her. Max turned. Samuel Norrell stood at the edge of the room, no longer pretending to be human. His mouth opened impossibly wide, no tongue, no teeth, just darkness. And from that darkness came a sound, the hum, louder now, pulsing through the earth. Greer raised her gun. "Don't move!" Samuel didn't even flinch. Instead, he raised a hand, and the chamber began to shift. The walls melted, the floor cracked. Screams echoed through the stone, not from their mouths, but from the air itself. Thousands of voices, children crying out, trapped in the earth. Jordan dropped to her knees, hands on her ears. Max tried to run, but his legs buckled. Only Greer remained standing. She fired 3 times. The bullets vanished before they reached him. Samuel stepped forward. "You opened the door," he whispered. Greer spat. "We're going to bury you in it." But Samuel only smiled. "I am the door." And then, nothing. Darkness. Silence. Max woke up choking on dirt. His lungs burned, his eyes stung, and for a second he had no idea where he was. Then the memories crashed back. The chamber, the tunnel, Samuel, and that endless mouth, full of nothing. He sat up, coughing hard. The tunnel was gone. So was the altar room. And so was Samuel Norrell. Only he and Jordan were left, lying on the forest floor just outside the ruins of the church. It was dawn. Mist clung to the grass. Somewhere nearby a bird called out like the world had returned to normal, but Max knew better. He looked at Jordan. She was still breathing, but unconscious. A few feet away, Greer lay flat on her back, but motionless. He crawled over and checked her pulse. Nothing. She was dead. Her face frozen in shock, her weapon still clutched in her fingers. Max sat back, stunned. Something inside him cracked. Greer was the strongest one among them. The one who believed them first, the one who fought. And now she was gone. Jordan stirred beside him, groaning. Her eyes blinked open slowly. "Where are we?" "Back outside," Max said hoarsely. "The tunnel's gone. Collapsed maybe, or... I don't know. It's just not there." Jordan looked at Greer's body, and a terrible silence passed between them. "Did we stop him?" she whispered. Max didn't answer. They walked in numb silence back to the road. There was no sign of Danielle or Officer Long. The car was gone. No cell signal, no tire marks. Nothing but the mist curling between the trees. When they finally reached Penfield 6 hours later, something felt different. The town was too quiet. No traffic, no kids on bikes, no dogs barking. And the people they did see stared at them, blankly, expressionless. Jordan clutched Max's arm. "Something's wrong." They ran to the police station, empty, chairs overturned, phones dead, computers smashed. No sign of Danielle, no sign of Long. But on the wall behind the front desk, something had been scrawled in black marker. "The circle is open." Max turned, jaw clenched. He didn't die down there. Jordan backed away slowly. He spread. They broke into Danielle's apartment that night, desperate for any clue. Her laptop was open on the desk, a document still glowing on the screen. Her final note. "I think he got to Officer Long. I don't trust him." He kept humming under his breath. "I don't think they want to stop Samuel. I think they want to become him. I'm going to the hospital. There's one last file I need. A baby that was never supposed to exist, born in 1993. No mother listed, no father, just a last name Norrell. If this is what I think it is, then he's not just one man. He's a bloodline." The file ended there. Max and Jordan raced to the hospital archives the next day. It was half abandoned, running on skeleton staff. Inside the basement, they found the file room. Most documents had been digitized, but a few were still physicals, especially the old ones. And in a rusted cabinet labeled 1993 Births, Confidential, they found it. A child born in Penfield General Hospital. No parents listed, no address. Delivered by a nurse named Alice Norrell. No gender listed, only a note in red ink. "Do not release to public record." Max turned the file over, and tucked between the pages was a photo. The same face from the forest. Pale, gaunt, empty eyes, black coat. Only this time he was smiling at the camera. And behind him, dozens of children, expressionless, as if posed. Underneath the photo, someone had written a name. He who stays behind the door. Jordan dropped the file. Max stepped back, heart racing. I think this isn't just a cult, he whispered. I think this is a vessel. Jordan swallowed. A body he uses over and over. They left the hospital and didn't look back. 2 days later, the Whitmore house burned to the ground. Locals claimed it was lightning, but the forecast had been clear. 3 more children went missing in nearby counties that same week. Penfield went quiet again, as if nothing ever happened. As if it had all been buried, again. 1 year later. Max and Jordan live in Maine now under new names. No phones, no internet, no contact with anyone from Penfield, but some nights Jordan still draws in her sleep. She wakes up with sketches on her nightstand she swears she didn't make. Sketches of the altar, of the circle, of the man with the empty eyes, and a message appears on the window every winter, when the frost comes. Written by a finger from the other side. Just one sentence. I remember you.